Everybody, Jimmy Smith with my post UFC 242 breakdown. It is Sunday, first day of the NFL season. I have my Steelers shirt on. We take on the Patriots tonight. Don't know how well that's going to go. But anyway, I've been off the radar for a while. And the reason is a family member of mine had a heart attack. And I had to go down to Miami and hunker down with the family. He's still in the hospital, going through a bunch of stuff. So it was pretty much a medical emergency. Then I had Invicta last Friday with Laura Senko. I did color with her. And then we had a hurricane possibility in South Florida, the first one I've ever experienced because I didn't grow up here. And it missed South Florida, but we didn't really know that. So I had to bring everything down to Miami where I was staying, kind of abandon the house for a house that was kind of better to survive a hurricane in. But I didn't have my microphone, I didn't have my setup, I didn't have anything there. I had to kind of store everything in here. So I've been really off the radar for 10 days, but that's why. A medical emergency combined with some weather issues and then work. So, which ironically, I wanted to do a bunch of stuff last week. I had a plan to do like a video every day, and then everything went sideways, and here we are. But I'm back for the time being and hope to do a bunch of stuff this week. I'm recording my podcast tonight. So anyway, UFC 242, by the way, thanks to everybody who voiced their concern about the medical emergency, but still ongoing. It's the way it is. UFC 242, I did the post-fight show on SiriusXM with Anthony Smith, and great guy to work with, really knowledgeable. We had a lot of fun breaking down this card, so check that out as well if you have a chance. But let's start at the bottom of the card. And one thing, when we do the post-fight breakdowns for Sirius, they generally focus on the main event, maybe co-main event. So we don't go into the entire card as much as I would like to. Carlos Diego Ferreira versus Taisumov. I thought Carlos Ferreira, after a slow start, really finished strong in rounds 2 and 3. Aggressive, accurate, great combinations, a lot of energy and excitement. That's a guy, I think it was the end of round 2, he walked back, threw his hands up, happy to be fighting. That kind of enthusiasm, when you're fighting somebody and they seem enthusiastic, right when you're also running out of gas and you're like, oh man, expending a lot of energy, that is terrible. It is absolutely awful to see your opponent happy when you're running out of gas. But that was really the case. I thought Taisumov did well in round 1. I totally agree with the scorecards on this one. Fajeda just finished strong in rounds 2 and 3. And to get rewarded with the right decision, I love seeing that. But aggressive, great combinations, and good accuracy. The problem is he's in a lightweight division, which right now is stacked with veteran murderers and big names. He's not on that level yet, and it's hard to get an opportunity against the names on that level when you're not there yet, meaning there are bigger names who can make more money fighting one another. So he's going to have a breakout kind of performance. This was a good performance, not a breakout one where he gets a big name yet, but we'll move on to the state of the division in a little bit. Curtis Blades versus Shamil Abdurrahimov. Curtis Blades, I think, is probably 4th best heavyweight in the division. Now, I talked about this with Anthony Smith, in that I think Curtis Blades is in a perfect position. The fight itself, takedown, ground and pound, elbows, punches. It was his fight from the beginning. Obviously superior with the takedown, obviously superior on top, obviously superior jiu-jitsu. Physically, he was just dominant. Abdurrahimov really didn't have anything for him, didn't land any significant strikes, couldn't stop the takedown, couldn't get him off him once he got him down. It was a wipeout. But Curtis Blades is, once again, 4th in the division. You have DC, okay, of course. You have Francis Ngannou, of course. I mean, how can you not? And you have Stipe Miocic, the champ. I would say he's 4th. Now, I think he's in a great place to be, in that DC may not fight again at all, period. May not fight again in heavyweight. May or may not take a rubber match with Stipe. Stipe's no spring chicken. He's been through a lot. Getting up there in years, not just years, but fights. How much more does he want to accomplish? I think maybe he fights a rubber match with DC. Tries to draw John Jones up to heavyweight. We'll see if that happens. Maybe one big money fight against Francis Ngannou. So 2 or 3 more fights and he's probably out, just career-wise. Ngannou's a very heavy hitter, but comparatively limited in that if Ngannou fails to win the title, let's say he gets a rematch with Stipe, if he doesn't win, the idea of him of the UFC throwing him against Curtis Blades again, when he's already beaten him twice, to derail Curtis Blades when you're not interested in seeing him fight for the title again is unlikely. So I think Curtis Blades is in a great position. He's young. He's, 28, 29 years old. So he's just coming into his physical prime. A lot of the veteran names in the heavyweight division are just old. I mean, I love Junior Dos Santos. He's old. I love Alistair Overeem. He's old. I love Stipe Miocic. He's old. I love DC. He's old. It's just packed with names that have a lot of value. They have a lot of history. They're great fighters, but they're getting long in the tooth. They're just getting old. Curtis Blaydes might be the young guy in the right position, where he's hanging out at about 4th right now, but he has a lot of years to get there, and the rest of them don't. Francis Ngannou, only 33, he's not old, but he has a style that, A, tends to get old fast, meaning he can't do a ton of things. Once somebody figures him out and is able to take him down a lot the way Stipe did, that might be the end for him. But the major thing is that Ngannou's already beaten him twice. So if Ngannou doesn't beat Stipe, there's no motivation to throw him in front of Curtis Blaydes again just to derail Curtis Blaydes. You want to kind of get him out of the way and let the fresh blood come in. Fresh blood right now is Curtis Blaydes. So as long as Curtis Blaydes stays in that, 4 to 10 range, doesn't lose any fights, he might just outlast everybody ahead of him. I don't think he beats DC right now. I don't think he beats Stipe right now. I don't think he beats Ngannou right now. But he might outlast those people as fighters and as contenders. So I think Curtis Blaydes is in a great spot, but a great win over Abdurakhimov. Islam Makhachev versus Davi Ramos. This fight drove me absolutely nuts because I'm a jiu-jitsu dork and I'm a big fan of Davi Ramos, and his submission game is sweet. It's slick. It's one of the best in the world, and he never used it against Islam Makhachev. It looked like a kickboxing match, and Makhachev was a superior kickboxer, was just outlanding him from range, better combinations, better leg kicks. Davi Ramos didn't get blown out. Didn't get seriously destroyed in the first 2 rounds, got hurt in the third. But I think that was a problem for Ramos, is that he was doing well enough to think, well, I can stay here and win, or I can stay here and do damage. I don't know what he was thinking. I have no idea, because there was no real commitment to the takedown. There was no using his hands to set up the takedown and get inside or get close and get in grappling range or clinch range. None of that. We saw in the Austin Hubbard fight that against a guy who was, in my opinion, an inferior fighter, but a decent kickboxer, he was eating punches where I was like, oh my God, he's going to throw this fight away. Because he wants to stand and bang with Hubbard, who, not a great fighter, but a decent kickboxer, landed a few times. He was going to throw that fight away. When I think on the ground, it would have been a complete wipeout. And he didn't seem committed to that game plan, which was weird to me. In this one, against a far superior kickboxer, he didn't seem to want to commit to the takedown in his ground game when he has world-class jiu-jitsu. This guy took ADCC. He's a great grappler. And he didn't use any of it. He was a shorter guy, the smaller guy, didn't have the range advantage, and he got blasted from the outside the entire time. And so just frustrating seeing a guy like Davi Ramos, who I think has real skills and can do damage in the division, not use his best weapon. That was weird. And you could say, Makhachev was outside. He did try a couple of weak takedowns, but I mean commit to it and use his hands to set up that side of his game, to set up that offense. Throwing punches in order to set up the takedown. That's what guys like a prime BJ Penn did so well. It was boom to the takedown. Matt Hughes threw that overhand right to the takedown. That was kind of his bread and butter, was use his hands to set up his takedown. And Davi Ramos just didn't quite do that. Seemed content to kickbox the whole time. Seemed very comfortable when he should have been uncomfortable. A little bit weird. Paul Felder, Edson Barboza. There was not a fight of the night bonus, which I thought was weird, because I thought, from what I saw, and I didn't see the prelims, I wasn't able to see him, I thought Paul Felder, Edson Barboza was fight of the night. I thought it was the best fight of the main card, although I liked Fajardo, Taisumov, but Felder, Barboza was back and forth, competitive in every round. There were back and forth rounds, meaning Personally, I thought Edson Barboza won round 1. I thought Paul Felder won round 3, and round 2 was up for grabs. I gave the edge to Barboza. I thought he won round 2, but it was close enough that I'm not married to it. I was really surprised at the 30-27 card for Paul Felder. I don't know how you give Paul Felder round 1. No idea. You can give him rounds 2 and 3, and obviously one judge did. I don't know how you give him round 1. I thought Edson Barboza clearly won round 1. But hard-fought win for Paul Felder. And one of the things about this fight that's important to keep in mind is there was a cut caused by a headbutt. All right? It was hard to not judge his face. And I've said this before in the just look at him argument about who's winning the fight. Just look at the guy. Some guys just bleed easily. Some guys, you hit them once and they're a mess. And other guys you beat up for 15 minutes and they look great. So that's not always the best criteria. Now, in this case, Paul Felder was cut by a headbutt, accidental clash of heads. But the blood went everywhere. So second and third round, he looked lumped up. When, once he was cleaned off, I didn't think he probably did. But the cut, which the judges are supposed to ignore because it was a clash of heads, so not a legal shot, led to him kind of looking beaten up and swollen because the blood was all over his face. I'm wondering if that was a factor at all. Now, once again, I thought Edson Barboza won rounds 1 and 2, but I was thinking that. I said, it's hard not to just judge, boy, he looks worse than the other guy because he has blood all over his face from a cut that you're supposed to ignore, or it's not supposed to be a factor in your judging. So that was interesting to me. But Paul Felder gets the decision. Edson Barboza surprised. And I was surprised, too, simply when I heard 30-27. I thought, okay, Barboza won it. There's no way you could give Felder round 1, but the judges disagreed. So Paul Felder wins. An interesting post-fight call-out, which is I want somebody in the top 5 or I'm just going to retire. I have my commentary gig. I don't need to fight. I'm either getting a top 5 guy or I'm retiring. The problem is there isn't a lot of room for him in the top 5 right now. A lot of them are busy. And what do you have? And this is off the top of my head. I'm not looking at it right now. Maybe Poirier would be a good one. But maybe Poirier. Conor McGregor, forget it. Because, number one, Felder is just too dangerous. And he's not a big money draw right now. So I don't see Conor McGregor going, yeah, I'll fight Paul Felder. I don't see that happening. And I don't mean Paul Felder wouldn't deserve it or do well. I'm not saying that at all. My point is Conor always thinks, what's the biggest fight financially that I could possibly make right now? And what gets me a win? Because right now, coming off the loss to Khabib, where he didn't look good, he's been out for a while, he wants to come back with some thunder and get a win. Paul Felder is dangerous. And it's not a record-breaking pay-per-view, him and Conor McGregor. Paul Felder's dangerous, but doesn't make huge money. Now, if any fight with Conor McGregor makes a lot of money, but he wants the maximum. Paul Felder is not the maximum, and he's tough. So I don't want that combination. That's something, if I were Conor's management, I would have him stay far away from. So, not Conor McGregor. Maybe Khabib. Not Khabib. Maybe Poirier. Certainly not Khabib. Justin Gaethje and Donald Cerrone are both fighting one another. And then is it Iaquinta next, I think? I'm trying to think who number 5 is. I just don't, there's not a ton of, maybe Iaquinta who's coming off a loss, but, do you want a guy coming off a loss who's also dangerous? So I just don't see, there's not a ton of easy matchmaking right there in the top 5. Okay, Diaz, if you want to put him up there, he's fighting Masvidal. So he kind of put a line in the sand. I want a top 5 guy or I'm out of here. Well, there's not a lot of room in the top 5 right now for him. So maybe Poirier, even coming off a loss, would be a good fight. That'd be entertaining. But the problem with that line in the sand is there's not a lot of opportunities. You don't want to back yourself into a corner where they offer you a number 7 guy and you're like, God, I said I want a top 5 or I'm out. Do I want to do that? Don't want to necessarily do that. Paint yourself into a corner with that call out. But good to see him win. Really nice guy. Awesome stuff. And he's certainly dangerous. But 34 years old, if I'm not mistaken. I know he's in his mid-30s. The clock is ticking. He doesn't have a lot of time if he wants to be leave with a legacy fight or be a contender in the last couple of years. He's run out of time. Mid-30s, it gets much, much harder. So, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. I know I didn't do a pre-fight of this, so you guys have to take my word for it. I thought Khabib would win this fight. I thought it would be tougher. I thought it would be more challenging at first, especially in the first 2 or 3 rounds. I thought it would be about even, and then Khabib would eventually wear Poirier down later. Khabib was dominant from the beginning. That surprised me. I thought Khabib would win. I didn't think he'd walk over Poirier. He pretty much did. I wouldn't say he took him down at will just because he doesn't have that kind of style. He generally goes after a takedown until he gets it, and that's what he did. But on the ground itself, man, did a great job of getting around guard. That knee pinch he does. Great ground and pound, great pressure. Poirier tried to scramble, tried to get space, and it wasn't there. There was a switch he tried to hit. If you know wrestling, there's a switch move. He tried to hit, and Khabib was having none of it. Everything Poirier was trying to do just got negated. And the guillotine at the end, when you go for the guillotine, ignore the hands. Just ignore the hands and the arms. They're not important. Once you have it locked, everything is hips and legs. That's where guillotine really comes from. I always tell guys, no guard, no guillotine. Meaning no hips, no guillotine, especially from the bottom. So it's really how much can you activate your hips to make it work. As soon as Khabib pushed down on the knee and got over that, the guillotine's still dangerous. It's not going to catch Khabib. Now, I know he went to his hip to get out of it, but once you're over the knee, all right, you only have one side you can really put pressure on. The other side, your knees underneath your opponent, you can only stretch so much with a knee under a guy. You need both legs. And so as soon as he didn't have both legs, I knew he'd have that guillotine. And the problem is, once he did, guillotine is one of those moves that just costs a ton of energy. Obviously, you're trying to get your hips activated. You're locking up both arms, your chest, your back. You're putting a lot into it, and he did. And as soon as Khabib got out, I think that was about it. Now, somebody asked me on Twitter, they said, should he have gone for that? He's losing bad. It was not a competitive fight. Go for it. Maybe you catch him. Hey, you could call it a Hail Mary, but if your arms are in tight, you feel you have it locked, hey, go for it and see what you can do, because you're not winning where you are right now. So it wasn't necessarily a bad tactical choice for Poirier. He's losing the fight. If he had been winning, that would have been a poor choice. But as soon as Khabib got over the knee, and you can't activate from that side your right hip, it's hard to finish a guillotine, especially on Khabib. I mean, what you don't understand really, if you haven't done jiu-jitsu for a long time, is just the micro adjustments a great fighter makes. All right? That's what gets someone into and out of a submission. It isn't the big macro movements of like pushing someone's elbow off and shucking them off. It's the little tiny things you do to get a little bit of space. I am from Carlson Gracie, and one of my coaches when I was in Long Beach was Brazilian top team. He was a Carlson guy, and he told me they used to do this drill where they'd let their opponent start all the way deep in a submission, like as deep as you can get it, and they'd say, go. And he goes, you tap over and over and over and over, like boom, tap, boom, tap, boom, tap, boom, tap. And after a while, you just learn, okay, this buys me a fraction of a second. Okay, well, this buys me a fraction of a second. Then I get my hand in here. All right, that buys me another. And you find these ways out from doing these drills where you're all the way in a guillotine. You're all the way in a guillotine, and you tap 10 times in a row, the 11th, 12th, 15th time, you start realizing the little tiny things you can do when it's desperate and you're finished, the little things you can do. And whenever you're going against a great grappler, they make these micro, tiny adjustments where anybody else would be done, and they just find a little space, especially in chokes, to get out and get back. And you know, as soon as Poirier put that guillotine on Khabib, Khabib was doing the little micro adjustments to get out. The big one was getting over that knee. The second big one was getting on his hip, but there are a lot of little adjustments that you're not seeing that Poirier can feel. That it's like it's not as tight as it should be against a guy in that position. So Khabib beats Poirier handily, choked him out in round 3. I thought he won every round. I like what he said afterward about respect and trash talk and little dig at Conor. So the future, and where does Khabib sit at 155 pounds? This gets thrown around too much, but I think this is appropriate in that, is Khabib the greatest 155-pounder of all time? The question to me, if you look at every division in the UFC, 155 is the only one that never had a dominant, long-reigning champion. Didn't have it. 125, okay. Who do you have? You have DJ. 135, Dominic Cruz. 145, Jose Aldo. Maybe Max Holloway, but Jose Aldo right now for me. 155, doesn't have one. Okay. 170, GSP. 185, Anderson Silva. 205, John Jones. Heavyweight Stipe. You have a great fighter who had a long run against a bunch of great names. Okay. The quintessential long-running champion. 155 never had that. One of the things that makes 55 so exciting is it tended to be a revolving door. There were a lot of great fighters. A ton of talent has gone through 155. So no champion really cleared out the division. The closest anyone came, the best 155-pounder of all time right now as I'm sitting here, I know this is hard, BJ Penn. Now, if you're a new fan, that's going to sound weird. BJ Penn, in his prime, was amazing. Amazing. Incredible. But he was at the top at 155 at perhaps the worst time to be at the top at 155. There was a time when the UFC didn't have a 105-pound division. The 155-pounders, they canned it as a division. I know that's hard to imagine, but there was no 155-pound division. Then he beat Matt Hughes at 170, got in a contract dispute, left the UFC, and this is a time when you could leave the UFC and have competitive fights elsewhere. He beat Bang Ludwig, he beat Rodrigo Gracie, he beat Renzo Gracie, he beat Takanori Gomi, fought Lyoto Machida. How crazy is that? So he came back, settled down at 155, and really looked amazing. Destroyed Sean Sherrick, all right, destroyed Joe Stevenson, destroyed Diego Sanchez, and destroyed Ken Flo. He just blew through everybody at 155. Now, he didn't have a really long run for a lot of reasons. Beat Matt Serra, had a draw with Kyle Uno. Of course, he knocked him out earlier. So it was just a weird time to be at 155. They had this weird tournament where they wanted to crown a 55-pound champion. It ends up being a draw with Kyle Uno, which I thought he won. So it was just a weird time to be at 155. So he never had that 5, 6, 7, 8 fight run that we define these great champions by. He never had that. He never had a John Jones run. He never had an Anderson Silva run. He never had a GSP run. So there's a lot of room for Khabib. There's a lot of room right now to say, well, I mean, he might be the top 155-pounder of all time in the UFC because we don't really have that name. Benson Henderson had a good run, but he was the king of the close decision. His best performance was Nate Diaz, I would say, and dominant, but he wasn't must-see TV. He won a lot of close decisions. Pettis, of course, flashy, great, spectacular finishes and submission stuff, didn't have a long run. So 155 has been kind of a revolving door. And BJ Penn, when I think he really could have settled down and been the greatest of all time, through factors totally out of his control, he wasn't able to do that in the UFC. And when you look outside the UFC, who's the greatest of all time? Takanori Gomi was absolutely incredible in Pride, had some goofy matches though. I liked Vitor Shaolin. He bounced around a lot, but did some great work in Shuto. But right now you can make a case for Khabib simply because I know it's only his second title defense, but he is in a division that didn't have that marquee champion of champions. There isn't that guy at 155. I think BJ Penn right now is number one. Khabib with a couple defenses could be number one. But right now I still have it BJ Penn simply because of how good BJ Penn was in his prime. But didn't have the run of a GSP, Anderson Silva, certainly not a Jose Aldo, anything like that. So there's room for Khabib right now in the discussion at 155. GOAT status in terms of pound for pound doesn't have the names yet. Yeah, 28-0 is spectacular, great. Injuries have really kept him from fighting a lot of great names until now. He's just starting, I think, to go on the run we're going to remember him for, if that makes sense. The big, big names. He hasn't fought a ton of them. This is a guy, when I was talking to Anthony Smith about it, it's really his last 4 or 5 that are super impressive. Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, Iaquinta, Edson Barboza. Beat Rafael Dos Anjos. I think that should be on the list. After that, it's some tough guys. Pat Healy, Thiago Tavares. I mean, tough guys. Gleison Tibau, although I thought he lost that fight. But not a run of amazing names. The names are really starting now. And if you look at his last ones, it's my list of his top 5 opponents would be Rafael Dos Anjos, Edson Barboza, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, Iaquinta. That would be the top 5 he's faced right now. So he's kind of starting the run. If he beats Gaethje, if he beats Ferguson, those are the 2 next ones, of course. Ferguson, hopefully next, please God. And then probably Justin Gaethje, if he can beat Cowboy, then we're talking about, okay, greatest of all time. But the reason he's in the discussion right now, even though he doesn't have a run of great names, is we haven't seen that fighter who had a run of great names at 55. It's a more wide open division than other divisions. So that's how I feel about it. I will be back this week now that I don't have to worry about hurricanes and all this other stuff. So I'll be back before the next UFC and after, and I'll be doing some other stuff Fight Quest related this week. Hope you enjoy. Talk to you soon.